Hello, everybody. This is Candid Frank, and welcome to Sports Wrap on the BarnBurner TV Network on Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV app available on Android and iOS. Joining me now is Mark Everett Kelly. Mark, welcome to the program. We're going to talk a little bit about sports news, and I got to tell you, it's getting interesting.
Yeah, Lucy, getting interesting. Yeah, I know, it's very interesting.
Getting very interesting. Well, here in Ontario and in Canada, pro sports teams are being given permission to open their training facilities.
I thought that wasn't supposed to happen until like July. No, they changed it?
Well, Ontario pro sports teams in Ontario are one step closer to returning to action. The provincial government confirmed today, Friday, it is enacting an emergency order to allow athletes and professional sports teams in the province to start training at their club facilities effective immediately.
Okay.
The order would cover NHL, NBA, MLB, MLS, and CFL clubs that play within the province of Ontario. Amateur athletes and those who play in lower tiered professional leagues in Ontario have not received the same level of clearance. So, but later they did say, you didn't have to be a professional league, but it's a case-by-case situation. As you can imagine, there has to be a level of trust on one hand of the government towards the organization that they're saying, go ahead, open up. So therefore, it's a known quantity. So maybe it's easier for them to say, okay, Maple Leafs, we know you guys are really concerned, but then they got to be sure about the smaller organizations that may not have not the commitment, because everybody's committed, I think, but the power to be able to enforce the rules and apply the rules exactly or as close to as required.
Okay. That just seems like there's still so much that the public doesn't trust. And so it's going to be hard to get that trust back without, any type of consistent game plan as far as how to do it.
Well, what you have in this case, Mark, the way this is working and the way it's going to work, I've always maintained it's the canary in the cage routine.
Yeah, it is.
Various canaries in various cages, not just within Canada, not just within the United States, but in the world sphere, where we're all going to watch. For example, the first ones to be watched were the World Wrestling Federation in Florida, who were continuing as normal, and people are watching how that was going, and whatever they accomplished, good or bad, was noted and used by whatever party wants to forward that kind of thinking. If there were no major incidents because of that, that would allow somebody else to raise the bar a little bit.
Right.
For example, here in Ontario. And then everybody's going to be watching what's going on in Ontario with the Maple Leafs, the Raptors,
right,
the Toronto FC, all that. They're going to watch that and they're going to say, well, they're doing it, but their doctors are going to say, just because they're doing it doesn't mean you can. But remember, we've got the politicians in between the business and the doctors trying to figure out where they're going to land.
Right. Right. And look, what I don't like is that there seems to be some sort of misunderstanding, I think, between what is acceptable to move on to and what is getting back full time. I think nobody has a problem with getting back in pieces and say, okay, like you said, we'll try this, we'll try this, we'll try this, as long as they have things in place so they can protect the people that are coming and the athletes. If that's that has to be set. So you can't have what you had over in Korea, which is you have 26,000 people congregated, and it's because it was a lack of planning. So all that kind of has to happen first. And like, to me, as long as you have testing available, and there needs to be 2 tests done. This is what I really believe. 2 tests done. You need to have a test to obviously determine if you have it, and then have an antibody test. So then you can determine if you are susceptible to giving it to anybody or getting it from anybody. So that's, if those 2 tests are done, then I think you will make everyone at least there feel better, and then you can separate people as B. But if that's not in place, I don't see how anybody's going to go comfortably somewhere where there's more than 30, 40 people and feel safe.
No, no, absolutely. And again, this truly is the canary in the cage, trial and error, and smaller groups are going to be the trial, the trial balloon to check out what works, what doesn't work, and then everybody's going to glob onto that, arrive at their own conclusion. Some are going to say, hey, you know what, it's working for them, let's give it a go. But the bottom line here is always about safety, and we live in a world where accountability, is determined by if you do something wrong, it could cost you, because that's the world we live in. So there's a vulnerability that we haven't heard much about, liability, if you will. How important is liability at this point, or do you think liability would be too hard to pin anyway because of the way this virus travels?
Well, I think liability is something that naturally comes everywhere. People are looking to, if they get hurt, I mean, there's going to be some sort of a repercussion. So that you don't want, nobody wants to see that. So, and I mean, Mayor Cuomo, Governor Cuomo talked about it today, where he does press conferences every day. And there's a big difference between Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. Most people don't like Mayor de Blasio. Most people don't trust a word that comes out of his mouth because he's a huge hypocrite. However, Cuomo is a little bit better. He has a little more trust. But even with Cuomo, he's trying to explain to people, look, we don't want to make a mistake here. When I let people back and when I let the businesses go, we can't, so they can resume, we can't risk taking a step back. And that's something that we have to worry about as public officials. Maybe individuals don't have to worry about having all that on them. I mean, look, you see it in the United States. How many people think that President Trump isn't doing the right thing, or some people he is doing the right thing? You can't win either way. So the only thing you can basically do is cover your butt, make sure that you're not doing something that's going to endanger anybody. And at the same time, everyone knows that the economy needs to get back. I mean, that is one thing that they cannot let go any further because there's just too many people suffering. And there's no way, if it continues, there's no way to really rally from that with any type of quick or consequence where it won't have long-lasting effects. And that's the real danger of what's happening now, is that we're getting to that point where we can't come back from. And before any of that happens, there's no reason, if essential businesses can be open, there's no reason why others can't either, as long as they're practicing standards and making sure that where they're providing a business place that people can be safe, that it's an environment that's not going to get them sick, that they're taking the precautions they need to.
Yeah, we're today, we're guideline driven, and the guidelines are drawn, we believe, by medical experts, enforced by politicians, who in turn, even in some cases, we've seen handed it over to the police, who have had to enforce, not to the extreme extent. We haven't seen that, and I don't think we will.
Well, they did see that. In the United States, there was that. They had a hairdresser who opened up a business who was arrested, and she had to go before the judge. And she said, I'm not going to apologize. I opened, I did this for my workers, and at least I know I can prepare an environment for them to be safe, because they wanted to go to people's houses and do it at people's houses. She says, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just meant on the grand stage,
okay.
Individual cases. It's like that security guard at the zoo that was pushed into the water. That doesn't happen everywhere. A security guard shot and killed because apparently my wife was offended.
That's crazy.
You're going to have that stuff. That's going to happen. If we're going to get caught in the weeds in every individual case that happens, if we're going to make that the reality, when it's the exception, not the rule.
Sure.
I'm just speaking from the rule perspective. In other words, the majority, the way it's working for the most part, not 100% obviously, but what works 100%. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. This is the lesson we're learning from the pandemic. It's not about solving every problem. It's about trying to maintain a level of success that allows us to open up again. Anybody who thinks, and I'm further left than Trump. Anybody who thinks that the only time that the economy is going to open up, the only time we're going to have athletes competing, is going to be when we can guarantee 100% safety. It's all risk management. It's a career. Risk management is a
Right.
career.
How much of our lives are daily risks anyway? I mean, none of us are guaranteed another second anyway. So, I can go out and get in a car accident and die tomorrow. So none of us are guaranteed anything. But if something like this makes it obviously more apparent, look, this can, there's no reason for something like this to kill you if it doesn't, when it doesn't have to. So I think that's the fine line that they walk. I wouldn't want to have to make those decisions for a lot of people. So, there is those who criticize have to realize the position that they're in as well.
The other problem we have is optics, and the optics are the leagues are going to say we would like to come back and we would like to make sure that we get testing. There are, even some leagues come right out and said we don't want to appear like we're being treated specially and we're getting testing more than anybody else, more than what's available out there for the general public. But that's a reality. President Trump and Mike Pence are being tested on a daily basis.
Yeah.
The people around them are being tested on a daily basis. That's why they know some stuff has come up with COVID. Some people around the president, the vice president have come up with COVID. They are actually in the throes of having COVID. They just haven't, they've been asymptomatic to this point, and some of them more than symptomatic. But to keep it on the sports part is that's the other problem. Testing is great if everybody gets tested, but if it starts to look like all the testing is being done only for special segments of society, but that could cause a backlash.
That's true, but that should be an issue. But again, you have to have more than one test done. Just having the COVID test isn't enough. You have to be tested for the antibodies, because that way, at least some people could have had the disease and don't know it, and they have the antibodies, and they're staying and they're not resuming their life. So those who have the antibodies can go back, and most science shows that they're not going to reinfect anybody. Okay, they're still at 100%. Can't say that, but most of past research and past viruses and everything we know tells us that won't happen. So if all you know is today, I had a test done a couple of weeks ago where I came up negative. I would need to be tested again. Now, I haven't had any symptoms, but I could be, for me to feel comfortable knowing that I don't have it, I would have to be tested again. I'm going to get an antiviral test done soon, because I feel like I might have already had it back in December or January when I got sick for a little bit. So I think people need to do that themselves. I think those things need to be available. I'm okay with our public officials and the frontline workers getting tested as often as they need to, because they are the ones that are out there and the face of us. But I am not okay, and you know this, I am not okay with ordinary people not having access to it. So if you need to get a test, you should get one. You should be able to get one. You should not be denied for any reason.
Well, the challenges that are out there are that being asymptomatic, and now tracing is a big issue where they're trying to figure out ways to be able to follow, if you will.
That's how you do it, though.
Yeah, and you got to follow where it is, and then create the atmosphere that everybody's doing right now, and heighten it a little bit in an area. So it's like whack-a-mole, right? That's what this disease, and that's where we're going to be. It's going to be just like whack-a-mole. Just it pops its head up there, you hit it over there, it pops its head over here, it pops its head over here, and you just got it. That's what's going to end up happening, because we wish we could predict it. We cannot. So we have to deal with it in a manner that basically is flying by the seat of our pants, because there is no predictability. There is no quick understanding of who has it and where it is. We have to look for it. So to keep it in the sports vein, the other thing is when the players come back and they start doing their thing and start practicing, and then they start doing testing, this can happen for multiple reasons. The reason we're able to do this is not only, the good news is that the vaccine may be discovered. There are about a dozen countries, businesses, researchers, companies that make vaccines. We're talking about they could find a vaccine. They're starting to really seriously talk about it happening by the end of the year.
Right. Well, that's what they say here. That's what they say here.
It was supposed to be anywhere from a year to 18 months because of testing and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. But necessity is the mother of invention.
Yep.
And there isn't a bigger necessity that we've come across as the human race than this one. So there's that. The fact that that's coming is something that helps us to say, well, we should be able to do this. But I think the key component is that they have accelerated the treatment. Yeah. Keep in mind that there still isn't a vaccine for AIDS, and that's decades later.
Right.
There's the treatment that keeps people from getting it and giving it.
Right.
And of course, safe sex, all that stuff.
Right.
Things have changed for some people. Things have to change for you and I, whether we're athletes or not, doesn't matter. And all those changes have to happen because we're a social being. Humans are social. It's not just about going to see sports. It's about being out there around people. That's the other thing. It's not just about business and money. It's about social well-being.
Right.
And we want to get out there for our own well-being. And watching sports is one way of activating that well-being.
Yep, I agree.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and actually you wanted to, and I definitely want to talk about this. On the same vein, the NFL has provided us, Mark, with a schedule.
Yep. Yeah. So you have the Chiefs and the Texans opening up in week 1 at Kansas City. So you have a rematch of the divisional round game where Kansas City fell behind 21 or 24-0, and was able to come back and blow them out. So most people view Houston as a team that's going to compete in the AFC, and it's always an exciting matchup, that first game. Everyone then wants to know, okay, what about primetime? What about Brady? When is that going to be? Brady opens up at Drew Brees and New Orleans in week 1, and then they see the Buccaneers are on primetime 5 times. So they're going to get plenty of Brady on primetime and on TV and for everybody to see. Another interesting week 1 matchup for those, in local, the Jets and Bills open up against each other again. Now they've opened up against each other in 2019, where the Bills came back in the second half. They opened up in 2017, where the Bills beat them at Rich Stadium. They opened up against each other in 2012 when the Jets set a franchise record with 48 points. They opened up in 1987 in Buffalo. They opened up in 1986 in Buffalo. The Jets won both of those games. So they're used to playing each other in season openers. And then who can forget 2002, which was Drew Bledsoe's first game, where Chad Morton became the first player in NFL history to have 2 returns, one being in overtime. So they're used to seeing each other on opening day. That to me is going to be fun. You have 2 teams that are, okay, who's going to be the next team to take over in the AFC East, with New England not having Brady anymore, and Miami maybe being a year away based on the availability of Tua.
How important, there's also the Skins game that's going to be happening with Brady, that's been decided. That should be a lot of fun too. You were talking about Brady and his favorite buddy in New Orleans. Well, they're going to be playing a Skins game against each other with the two of the top golfers in golf.
Yeah,
that'll be a lot of fun. So that's
$10 million or something for charity. Yeah,
that's our first opportunity to see the football personalities out there. But what we haven't heard yet is training camp. Is this schedule? It starts and it says it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But what about training camp? I mean, without training camp, the schedule is going to be meaningless.
Yeah, I look, there's going to have to be a way they decide how to do that. I think it's okay. Again, by then we're talking 3 months from now, or 2.5 months from now, where there should be for football teams the availability to have testing every day or have testing done. Okay, you come in, you don't have the virus, you have the antibodies, we can put you in here. And then if somebody does get sick, then they can put them in an area for a couple weeks. They can control that. Okay, if you're talking about a team at one location, there's a way they can control that. They should be able to a couple months from now. That's the thing about this disease, is it changes so fast. I mean, a couple weeks ago we were thinking, how many hundreds of thousands of people were going to die. Now it's been reduced to a lower number that if you would have said a couple weeks ago, they would have said you're crazy. So we don't know how much is going to change from now until then. We're talking, in 2 months, a lot could change, and there's a lot being done now to hopefully, aid in that change. So for people who are forecasting that far away, you really can't, because you don't know what's going to become available as the weeks go on.
Yeah, no, and that is the most critical thing. The critical thing is the lack of predictability.
Yeah,
and laying with a plan that takes into effect based on what you know, and in this
Yep.
you don't know much. But again, we're down to the final couple of minutes, and I think I want to make sure that people hear a positive side. We're both guys that have had challenges in our lives that most people don't have the misprivilege of going through. And watching what I've seen now, the most important thing I think is that society has shown us, people in general have shown us, that they have a kinder, gentler, more considerate side. Reaching into your background, your presence, how you feel. How heartwarming has it been to see this kind of behavior? Now we get, of course, we'll get those shots over the bow, but fortunately, predominantly speaking, society, people have been actually pretty good. How do you feel about that?
Well, look, there's a genuine feel about most New Yorkers. People think New Yorkers are rude. People think New Yorkers have attitudes. And look, they can, okay? I'm not saying they don't. Look, especially Long Island people can be moody, all right? But when there is a problem, and nobody saw this more on 9/11, New Yorkers run, and they're the first ones to throw themselves in front of the bus. They're the first ones to help their fellow sister. So that was more been heartwarming to me. There have been plenty of things around here where you have restaurants, where you have people donating to hospitals, donating to workers on the front line. All of that being done because they want to do something. People want to feel that they can contribute, and I think that's a lot of what's missing now. And that's why there's a lot of this mental drain too, and that's something people aren't talking about. While we're worried about COVID, there are a lot of people that are going through mental problems right now because they feel like they're not doing anything, and they feel like now that they're stuck in a room and all the other. You don't really know. Sometimes being locked in a location can trigger some things that you never knew you had. So that's a dangerous situation. You don't want to put people in that situation for too much longer where they feel like they're trapped. That's why you and I were talking about this before, where people need to have choice. You start taking choice away from people, you're really going to make this thing a lot worse.
I'm not getting religious on you folks, but there's this saying that I grew up with: the idle mind is the devil's playground.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. and I can think myself into anything. Okay. The worst for me is when my mind starts going, and I will crucify myself. No, I will absolutely, be my worst enemy if I'm left to enough time to think. So, while I enjoy using my mind, and I think I'm a creative person who generally a positive person who has, likes to do things for others and really looks for the positive in people and encourages everyone I know. There is a definite side that if you can let the demons, so to speak, when the demons come, they can eat you alive.
Here's the segue. Perfect segue. We talk about the devil's playground. What about forgiveness? Forgiveness for Pete Rose, Major League Baseball player, manager, easily a Hall of Fame candidate, barred from baseball, kicked out of baseball like he doesn't exist. After everything that's happened the past couple of years with the Red Sox and the last 2 World Series champions, do you think it's time to forgive Pete Rose for gambling on himself? He wasn't gambling to cheat, I don't think. It doesn't sound like it. I haven't heard anything that says he was gambling to cheat. He was gambling because he liked gambling, and he was betting on himself and his team.
Yeah, look. What Pete Rose has been his own worst enemy. Okay, he could have ended this years ago if he would have came clean. Right, he didn't come clean until about 2004. And again, it looks like everything he does is to promote himself. And I think that's what has been his worst enemy. Do I think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. Do I think that he should be allowed back into baseball? Absolutely. But when you look at everything else that's going on, to me that is a little bit of an injustice. However, he has done nothing, really nothing, to show baseball that he can handle that he deserves that himself. Me saying it because I feel as a player, I remember what he was and I remember things he can do, means nothing. Until he does it with his full heart, there's no way they're going to allow him back in.
So, forgiveness without contrition.
Absolutely. You have to contrite. I mean, you have to be contrite. Everything in life, speaks about it in the Bible. A contrite heart, is definitely something you need when you're asking for forgiveness. The person can tell if you're not being remorseful.
Yeah, and forgiveness, blind forgiveness. I'm not a big fan of blind forgiveness. Just simply because
that's what we're called to do, though. Regardless, we're called to forgive. And
absolutely.
If you don't, you will pay the penalty in some other way.
Absolutely. He's Mark Everett Kelly. Get your Everett and your Mark all together.
I forgive you.
Mark Everett Kelly. I'm kidding, Frank. Thank you for watching Sports Wrap on the BarnBurner TV Network and on Zingo TV channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV app, available on Android and iOS devices. Don't forget about the BarnBurner Radio Network, which is available on 122 platforms. Watch us, hear us, read us, and download. Have a great day. For Mark, I'm Frank. Thank you for tuning in.